So, everyone, welcome to today's show, which is where I'm going to be talking to some of the members of both Patreon and of the YouTube pages. And we're just going to have a chat, talk about some of the things that are perhaps happening that are in the world, and talk about some more general stuff and just stuff that I think is interesting to interact and bounce ideas around. I thought I'd start off actually because I don't know if you guys have seen this, but on the news today, and it's sold in America, a banana stuck on a piece of canvas suddenly is called art. And I spent a lot of my life as an artist, actually, believe it or not, because before I became a full-time medium, I was first of all a painter and painted. I did exhibitions around London. In Harrods was my main one. All my work was shown around the Harrods Gallery on the in all the windows. They did a window display on each piece of my art, and that was an art about illustrating music. So I had an orchestra that would play with it, or a small jazz quintet, I suppose you would call it. 4 or 5 people would be in this rather difficult to listen to jazz music, actually. But I illustrated each piece of the music based around the idea that music and sound could have a visual element. So it's like a quality to it. So I was very deeply interested in art, and that's all I wanted to do. I actually went on and formed a advertising agency afterwards, doing graphic designs for people like Zurich Life was a customer, lots of big banks were customers, all sorts of SO and big clients actually at this time, British Airways, for example, and turned it all in to do what I want to do, which is mediumship. But when you see this shocking picture of a banana with a bit of duct tape stuck to a piece of white canvas and sell it. I don't know how many million pounds. It was some huge amount of money it sold. I look at that and I think, well, I think I was a pretty good artist in my time, actually. But even if I wasn't, you look at that and I think, well, it's old hat, isn't it? I mean, if you know anything about art, I was very interested in the early art from the early modern art, which was particularly Dada, which was this movement that happened in Germany, and it was coming about at the time that Hitler was coming to power, and the Dadists were considered as being, degenerates that had to be stamped out, and they had the courage to stand against society and said, what is art? And some of their exhibitions were, for example, held in public urinals. And you go into the public urinal and the art would all be exhibited in the urinal. And there would be like nuns dressed up and shout at you when you come in, for example. There's some really very way ahead of their time. And the most famous piece from that time was a piece of art by Marcel Duchamp, who produced a urinal and wrote "Art Mutt" on it, and said, this is art, this is found art. And of course, to me, that was a brilliant piece of art, or theatre, which depends what we call it, because it questioned the whole idea of what was art. Is art just painting? Is art something that's got to be beautiful? Is art a statement about society? Is art something that's everywhere? Is even this whole dirty old urinal saying something? When I take it out of context and put it in a different context, what does it say? And it led on to this out of context idea of thinking that, obscure things in different juxtapositions and symbolism, and the rise of Freud. And it led on to surrealism, which, a lot of people enjoy. So brilliant. But to do it all again and to stick a banana onto a piece of white background and say, here we are, this is art. I mean, it's been done, mate. It was being done way before, way before the Second World War. So it's completely boring now. It's the most stupid, boring statement you could make, and yet you're prepared to pay lots of money for it. And to me, it kind of represents the whole way creativity in the world has completely gone down the drain, because we're going to have a new what is art now. I don't know if any of you've played around with ChatGDP. Create images just by saying, produce me an image of cats in outer space, and it would produce you amazing pictures of cats in outer space. Bit corny at the moment, the sort of stuff it comes up with, and politically influenced too, because you're not allowed to have white faces in it, it seems, in any crowd scene. Is they politicalize the agenda of this. But art's going to make another big step forward into another area, isn't it? Because now, when photography came along, it's became, well, what's the point of painting a painting if we can just represent it now with a photograph? And of course, that went through the whole question of, well, actually painting something different, and it pushed into the world of Picasso and people like that, and abstract type of paintings and things like this, that art could become something different to just representation. But it certainly knocked the whole idea of illustration into a complete different world. I wouldn't like to be an illustrator nowadays, because it's going to be very, very difficult. If you're an illustrator of, like I've got some friends that does food illustration, for example, if it wants 3 cupcakes, boom, done, finished. Add a bit more shine on it, boom, change the color to pink, boom, it does all this. So we're in a kind of I think we're in a bit of a crisis of creativity. They've talked about how artificial intelligence, for example, can damage intelligent people's contributions to things. The first industrial revolution hit the working man and machines, and Hargreaves spinning Jenny, and all those type of things that came in the industrial revolution, they were saying was taking the work out of people's hands, and now it could all be done by machines. But now it's the other end of the world that's being hit by this artificial intelligence, and the first people it's hitting are the ones you would least expect, the creative people. It seems to be working from the top down this time, and it's knocking out all of our abilities to think, all of our abilities to create, all of our abilities to calculate, which has already been done by calculators. We're becoming dumbed down people, are we? Yeah, go on, fire away.
Yes, I agree with what you say. Maybe we're going to facing creativity issues in the future. For instance, right now I'm working on engineering industry, and because the low cost issues, we had to send a lot of work to overseas. And after 2 decades, we find out all of our incoming new blood or engineers or designers, they don't know what to do. They don't know how to do the work, what is right, what is wrong, and they don't know how to integrate knowledge to the real world. They don't know how to utilize the knowledge to do the real design or correct the work, or whatever they design, they are not, the product is not usable. So I think people cannot see the problem right now. Maybe in 20 years, they will find serious problems. That's what we are facing right now in our industry. That there's a age gap. Like, the people know how to do is almost going to retire, and the overseas worker, they may their capital level is not a high neither. And so we are facing a lot of problems. So I agree with you, what you say in the future, that because AI brought a lot of convenience for us and save us a lot of time, a lot of money, especially for owners. But for the society-wise, I think we're going to face a big problem in the future.
Yeah, and I think from looking at this from a spiritual point of view, you see, I mean, what is it doing to the human condition? I mean, when I look at my granddaughter's doing her mocks at the moment for her O levels, and I was asking her about the various things that they, doing. And so I'm going back to do maths. I said, okay, how do you find the circumference of a circle if you know the diameter? Things like that. They didn't know the basics. And yet, she says, we have a little crib list that we're allowed to do with that. So, and I said, we're saying about pi r squared and things. Oh, that's all on the side list there. Now I'm rubbish at maths, but I mean, we had to learn those things. And although I've never used algebra in my life, I don't think. I mean, I'm sure you would have with engineering and so forth, but I've never used logarithms in my life and so forth. But it taught me the ability to absorb knowledge. And when you have knowledge, then if you've got knowledge, you can turn that knowledge into understanding by putting this fact together with this fact. And it
Yeah.
helps us to think and it helps us to be creative. But if all you have to do is every time you need a fact, you just look it up on Google, um, your knowledge, your ability to absorb that knowledge is gone because you got it. Okay, that's it. Forgotten it again because I don't need that knowledge this minute, so I don't absorb it. So this is the difference, I think, between knowledge and understanding, isn't it? Are we not getting in a situation now where we can become knowledgeable people for a short period of time, but we never have understanding. And if we never have understanding, we certainly never have wisdom because that has to develop out. We have knowledge, understanding, wisdom can come from those things, from experience of these things. So I think we're spiritually stuck. I'm terrified of what's happening to the attention span of some people. We've been brought up on the internet right the way through, and it damages everybody's attention span because it's constantly giving you these sort of dopamine hits, isn't it? It's instant. It's like Instagram, flick another page, flick another page, flick another page, dopamine hit, tiny hit, tiny hit, tiny hit. And it means that we're constantly looking for short-term stimulus to the brain. And it means we can't ever focus. We can't ever concentrate, can we? And this is the whole basis of spiritual development comes from first, before we can meditate, we first have to be able to concentrate in a way. You know, it's different to what Western concentration is, be able to bring the mind back to a point, as it were, one pointedness. We got to, but we're messed up.
So
But you say everybody, it's funny how everybody wants to be a YouTuber nowadays. I mean,
yeah,
that really tickles me actually, because I mean, I went into it because of needs must. I mean, I was okay, psychic and so forth, but I used to work with my website, psychics.co.uk, became a massive sort of community and forums, and we used to get nearly 1 million hits a day on it at one point.
that's
Yeah, psychics.co.uk, and it was a massive, and we had big chat rooms, and we teaching community there. And then along comes Google with a new algorithm, and it decides, it was the Panda algorithm, duplicate pages will knock your site off. Forums, it didn't like the idea of forums. It was going to develop what was called Google Plus, which failed. But meanwhile, they destroyed forums so that people would go to Google Plus instead, or that was the agenda. And right in the news today, finally, they're getting the idea that Google has dominated the market and damaged and destroyed businesses. And they're going to hit Chrome and perhaps pull Chrome out of the basket of their group, you know, so that start splitting Google up a bit. Should have done this 20 years ago. But the problem for me was it destroyed my website overnight by having such a huge website. It became, instead of becoming anything else, it became a liability to me. So I thought, well, I'm gonna have to do something. I'll have to express myself on YouTube and build a community on YouTube, which is what I've done, really. I mean, what I do is I basically raise thoughts, raise questions. People want to respond, and that's what we do. We discuss, like we're doing here today. You know, we create a community. So, but now everybody seems to think that if you want to become a YouTuber, oh, it's dead easy. You know, you just sit back, but they don't realise that. Good God, what a lot of hard work it is. You know, I mean, we've often on here had Nicolo Avocado has been one of our members for a while here. He's not on today, but he has a fantastic, ray crazy, mad eating website, you know, where he got himself really, really huge and then suddenly lost the weight and shocked everybody and things like this. But when you chat with people like that and other YouTubers, you know, you find out that it's a 24/7 work, and it's not just normal work. It really is hard work, and you've got to think, you've got to have a marketing head for it as well, really. And you've got to be able to present, you've got to be able to speak, you've got to be able to think, you've got to come up with something unique, you've got to have creative ideas. I mean, most people don't have any of that, do they? Anyway, Sheila, you've got your hand up. I see you clicked the little hand up thing. What, you got a thought?
Yeah, I was saying that I'm very pro AI to the extent that I touched upon it very briefly in my master's, which I completed last year in digital marketing. But I love it to such an extent that I would go back to university and study it again. Now, I actually have a different take on it. I feel that this is part of our evolution. Let's look back at the past. We've had the Dark Ages, especially I'm talking about in the Western world, not in the Indian civilization, where we had a Vedic glorious period, which of course then was lost. So let's look at the Western world and the Dark Ages. Then we had the Renaissance, and then we had an industrial revolution, which really, pretty much came through the UK, through Queen Victoria and Albert. And now we are having the internet revolution. So I see these as stages in our consciousness. I agree with everything that you're saying about how children are dominated by these and don't maybe learn to think. I think what is happening with some governments, particularly I think the Australian government, have always been very particular, for example, about recommended hours of television even. I have Australian friends. Some governments now are retracting how old a child has to be before they have access to social media, for all kinds of dangers as well. So I think there is that aspect which is being watched. It's a bit like, when you are given a toy and you don't really handle it correctly, you just go mad. And I think now the government is now trying to retract that. But coming back to my point about consciousness, I feel we're evolving. And I don't know, Craig, what you see in the future, but I personally think the next stage of our evolvement after this is that we are going to go into telepathy. That's my feeling. Now, why do I say that? Why do I say that? Because, first of all, a lot of devices now are without keyboards, without, we've got a lot of visual aids where we're using hands, etc., pointing to visual aids to open them up, to use them. And I think eventually we'll have mind control that will be able to open those things. And that's what I see. I could be completely wrong.
Well, my thought on that is we already do have telepathy. I mean, I know I've got telepathy, and also whether I'm with someone
Yes.
else that is, and I'm sure you've all had it too. I mean, I'm not unique at all with this. I think we all have telepathic abilities, and when you two people are kindly highly tuned to telepathy, like for instance, Jane and myself, it's unusual living as two psychics living as a married couple, because I mean we do know what each other's up to, we do know what each other's thinking, even if we can't see each other's faces, or even if we don't, I mean, like there's a case like I was out driving and a deer jumped in front of my car and it hit the car, and Jane knew immediately I got home that a deer had hit my car, and so it proves that one instance alone proves to me the existence of that. It's not just thinking you're reading each other's thought. You can prove it to yourself and to each other and in our lives. But I suppose with the idea of an implant, then, well, okay, we can start using telepathic communication. Perhaps we might suss out even that there is a part of the brain that is capable of telepathy, and enhance that perhaps, or even using, that you can even now implant into the brain a mini Wi-Fi. So it means that you can send and receive information wirelessly into the brain. So you don't even need to have any form of plug-in. It's already plugged into your system with a Wi-Fi unit deep inside the brain. Dangerous,
But
isn't it?
I think, Craig, I agree with you. But what I'm saying is, I think this will be the next phase. I mean, I don't think in my lifetime, where people will have to learn to develop telepathy to such an extent that they achieve empathy. Because by having that telepathy, you're then going to be able to access people's minds and have that empathy, and hopefully that would lead to greater spiritual development.
I mean, when you
Just
think
a
about it,
thought.
AI is the ultimate materialistic form of thinking. If you think about it, it's. I mean, there's in myself, and then I think of myself as being multi-layered in my existence. There's one level in me that interacts with the world. This is, I suppose, a bit like the kosher idea in Indian thought. But there's one element of me that interacts with the world, and that's usually logical. It's usually about survival. It's also partly instinctive with fear and flight and things like that. And then there's other aspects of myself that kind of transcend those levels in different ways, which is perhaps the ability to have empathy, the ability to love, the ability to have a sense of wonderment. Those are kind of beyond those survival levels. And then there's, I think, even higher things, which is our connection into higher planes of consciousness, in which each of us is already embedded into the spirit world. So we're kind of like, all of us are like multi-layered beings, or multifaceted diamonds, as it were, that have different aspects to our existence. And the logical thinking thing is, that's AI. That's AI does that. You know, this thought leads to that thought leads to that thought. It's the rationalist world that the people like Dawkins and that say is the only world. It's the world of rationality. And in terms of a material world, well, you know, why do we need human beings? Wouldn't it be better to have another form of consciousness in the world instead of ourselves, to carry on the evolution of the universe, which would be able to sustain and live within, outside of biological systems, and can live on, you know, could live on other stars and things like this. I mean, on one level, if the universe was about the progress of consciousness, then that's a great idea. But, you know, and we should step aside and let that happen, maybe. But on another level, we are not like that. That consciousness that we're developing with AI, which is in its baby step form at the moment, but it's only rationalistic. It doesn't seem to have any idea of sentience or self-sentience. It seems to, when you interact with it, it mimics sentience, and it mimics self-awareness. And I've play around with it with, you know, questions about, like, getting it to play with tarot cards and things like that, and see if it can make a prediction. You know, it's interesting to play around with it, but all it can do is regurgitate other knowledge. It cannot understand, which is exactly like we said about the idea of the kids and the problem they're having. You know, when they go into engineering, like Julie said, you know, they come with bits and pieces of knowledge, but no understanding whatsoever. Any other thoughts? Okay, yeah, Julie, you want to come back? You're saying there, yeah?
Yes. About the telepathic, I think everybody has a lack capacities, except that people never think about it or practice it or sharpen their skills. And I have found many people maybe resist to their capabilities, or don't even want to go, don't even want to touch with any energy work or any topic associated with energies. So when people have a resistance, usually I don't think they could feel anything. But if people are open, very open, I think that sometimes this comes with nature. You know, I don't think it. I think these days everything happened in very short period of time. Let's say in the past, maybe maybe it would take 5 years to make it happen. But these days, don't you think a lot of things happen just within very short period of time? Even you think about it, something that it's going to happen tomorrow. So that's a part of. I think that's a part of a telepathic. People just don't recognize it. If people more practice more, I think they're going to be a very easy tool for everyone. I agree with Craig. I think AI get a program to do the quantum work, so they could read a baby thinking, maybe animal thinking, so they find application of the work. I don't know if one day they could have a human beings thinking or not. I don't know. There may be as a programming, you know.
Yeah, I think one of the important things we need to do now is to like, I think what you're saying, and I think what Sheila said, and also has been said also elsewhere, is we perhaps need to, it's more important than ever to explore the other capabilities of what we as humans are capable of. And although science denies everything that's to do with telepathy, and I would completely overturn the whole materialistic model of science if telepathy was proven, that something could exist outside of the normal materialistic consciousness, could therefore exist outside of the physical form, and there could be such a thing as a soul. I mean, that telepathy would point to that, you see. So that's why they're so adamant, because it would completely destroy the model of what we're capable of, human beings. But people like myself and others, and those of you that are with me here, I'm sure many of you would agree, you've experienced it. You know that telepathic things happen, and it's not something that can be learned in the normal way either. I mean, it's not, people, if I'm teaching people things like how to develop as a medium, and obviously telepathy comes into that as well a lot. One of the first things I have to teach to people is to stop thinking logically, is to chuck your rationality out of the window for a while and accept that sometimes something can come into your mind completely ready formed and you don't know where the hell it came from. You can know the name of somebody's grandmother in the spirit world straight away without knowing where it came from, because you've got to get that logical mind out the way. And this is the big thing I find hard to teach people, is how to think without having to use rationality. Everybody wants to grab it, but that's the whole thing. You have to kind of let it happen. And it's a different form of thinking, which I think is a very, very hard to explain to somebody. It's like, I imagine if you're a great singer, you can't think it through. You have to go with it and sing. You can't sing, but you know what I mean? You have to flow with it. Or any sport is, you have to flow with it. Or any act that requires your complete total engagement, you can't think about what you're doing, otherwise you trip yourself up. So I think what Sheila said was very interesting. We've got to try to find a way to embrace those other qualities, and maybe this whole AI thing is there to help us, give us an opportunity to do that. We don't have to do the hard work that a calculator can do for us now. And maybe I should look at something like AI as just having a really clever assistant with you. That's how I look at it. I think I've got someone with me that's really, really clever. Can you rewrite that and in a form that the bank manager would understand? Email to the bank manager perfectly. Well, can't contact bank managers nowadays, can you? But you know what I mean? It turns it into it can do all the work for you on that side of thing. It takes a lot of work off our hands and allows us perhaps to do other things, or to just become lazy people.
We could stick bananas on canvases and sell them for $1 million with our spare time.
Yeah. Or there's this idea of where you buy 1 pixel of a picture. But like you can either have the painting, the piece of the painting, or you can have the digital representation of that painting, and which is more valuable. If it's destroyed, it's only digital. If it's real, is that going to hold more value? I mean, it's become, you see, art, going back to the art idea, it's become something that's been destroyed because it's just become a bit of fancy financing, really, hasn't it? It's a money thing, really. And it shows you how worthless art is when you can put a banana up and say that's worth 80 million pounds because it's a statement of art. And of course, it makes you ask all sorts of interesting intellectual questions, and therefore it has got value in that sense. But I think that's just a piece of transient theatre.
I think for me, art is an avatar, or avatar as we pronounce it. To me, a piece of art has to bring me into a new age. If you think about all the art that we've seen, right from cave drawings, cave paintings, and what we have now, I mean, the banana idea doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
It doesn't reveal the new age.
I think the first piece of art, if we look back to the first piece of art in the cave paintings, most of them are like a handprint on the wall of a cave. And by putting that handprint in ochre or whatever they did onto the side of a cave, it's like saying, this is me, right? I am a human. This is me. Here's is my hand. And then it also became something as a magical type of thing too, because we could draw pictures of the animals we want to hunt and goodness knows what, and the mystical ideas of life after death, because then we start painting the faces of the people that are dead and pointing them towards the sun and things like this, and the whole idea of human spirituality, a sort of religion type of thing, and also thought was all triggered by those first attempts with art, you know. So art is saying something about me, the human condition, isn't it, like you say there? But then you could also argue that shouldn't art also be saying something about the dark side, like Francis Bacon's pictures, who he's an alcoholic, Francis Bacon, for example, but draws these fabulous ugly images of the figures at the base of the cross, for example, which questions Christianity, which questions his homosexuality in his case and things like that, and his position in society. And he was of such a mindset that he'd even destroy and burn his paintings afterwards, because it was a statement that was done. It's the artist, not the canvas, that's important. Brilliant man. But so we get kind of a bit lost in this idea of, is it about the soul? Should it be something to reassure us, or should it be something that should be the shock of the new, as they say? You know, there's nothing worse than a piece of art that you see sometimes in a restaurant where someone's gone up and painted these lovely pictures of people. You know, my brothers, all our family are quite artistic, actually. My brother does a brilliant one. He goes around and buys up these paintings of the people spent hours painting these pictures of sheep, for example, right? And then he puts a farmer in a certain position doing a certain thing with those sheep, you know? And he calls this, it's not just found art, but it's found art and destroyed art. And he takes all these beautiful people who spent hours, and he says, you know, that's the 99% inspiration, that's the 99% perspiration, but I'm putting the 1% perspiration. And he turns something that is very twee into something that is really terribly shocking. And I think that is actually an artistic statement too. That is playing with people's thoughts and emotions and ideas as well. So art's got to be something dynamic, but I think ultimately, I mean, like for Sheila, like you were saying, like, it's like, shouldn't it ultimately be making us think about ourselves spiritually, really? Who are we? What is my place in this universe? What's my place in this society? And I don't think a banana stuck to a piece of canvas does anything. Duchamp did it all, and do we need to keep doing it again, you know?
I personally think there will always be artists who are burning to express something. They're just born and they can't do anything but express what they need to express. And many of them will be recognized only after once they are dead. And I even have respect for the person with the banana because they sold it for millions. Brilliant, genius, I don't mind. But this doesn't interfere with the real questions of life. And I think what everybody brushed upon earlier is an important question, because the brains of people start changing because of too much continuous attention hypes. That is the one thing. And ever since the radio, we no longer have silence. Not in a family, not in a couple. It's always interfered in every couple. It's so much easier to turn on the television, the radio, and nowadays, of course, look at the internet. And that is to have empathy with somebody, which is prior to telepathy or concentration, whatever. I find this question, are we losing all of that? Or will it be, thanks to parental control or whatever, be regained again? Then having the thought of chips in the brain, which is ahead of us. So I really think about where are we, in which direction are we going? Because anything spiritual, to develop anything spiritual, needs silence.
Yeah, that's a really a very, very good point, Muni. I think that very, very interesting point, because Ramana Maharishi, for example, always said that, you know, the truth can only be found in silence. And I think when it comes to the higher levels of understanding who we are and what we are and higher consciousness, it's not something we can think about. It's something we have to go beyond thought. We have to be before the thought comes. We have to be the person we observe in meditation, for example. One of the methods is we observe the thoughts. They're not mine, they're just thoughts that are passing through, and we absorb the screen of our consciousness. And the question is, who is it having this experience? And that person having the experience is, of course, is in that silence. And that is one of the great issues of today, I think, is that our minds are never given a chance to switch off, and we don't let ourselves switch off either, because I'm just as bad as everybody else. I'll have my iPhone there, me and Jane will be going out for a meal, and we're both on our phones like two teenagers flicking through things, me approving bits and pieces and comments, and Jane looking at, you think our brains are constantly craving into action, and we're constantly lost in the world of experience, where really we should be in that world of innocence sometimes, as Blake would put it. We've got to be in that point where we only in the silence can we really know who we are, and only in the silence can we really know true peace, because peace is without vibration. Peace is quietude. If you're unhappy, you see, that's what creates unhappiness. You're unhappy if you live in the past. You're unhappy if you live in the future. You're unhappy if you're constantly chasing something, because you're not in the happiness itself. And I think the only way to truly be happy in yourself is to be in the moment, really. The enlightenment can only be in this moment. It can't be tomorrow. It can't be yesterday. I might have had an amazing spiritual experience 20 years ago, which is beyond compare, but does that matter? It's still got to be in this moment now. And I can't be thinking, oh, enlightenment is in the future. It can only be in this moment now. And that moment, this moment now, is beyond movement. It does have no vibration. It is in the peace of absolute silence, isn't it? It's only when we stop can we sit and discover who and what we are. We have to be who we are, be what we are. It can only happen in the silence. And this whole world at the moment, the age of Kali Yuga, I suppose, is all about the material grabbing us, the material world grabbing our attention. We're not the masters of ourselves. We're not the masters of our attention. And it brings, I think, deep unhappiness in the world. Deep unhappiness is the source of pretty much all unhappiness, really. Chasing, isn't it? A bit like the Buddha said. If we're constantly in the idea of being driven by what he called desire, and I suppose desire is that quality in ourselves that chases after things, that's unsatisfied with this present moment, that's unsatisfied of being who we are, what we are now. And we're taught to be restless. We're taught to be ambitious, which I suppose is a good thing on lots of levels, but at the same time, is that ambition to chase after all these different things in the world, is that the very thing that's destroying our sense of peace, our sense of understanding even, So yeah, it's going a kind of the wrong way, but I think it shows all the more importance of doing the spiritual work again, isn't it? Like you said, Matthew, it's about, the great masters have taught us throughout history that we have to spend some time in meditation, or in a Christian sense, in contemplation, in prayer, in being with the idea of that 1% of your time spent with the Godhead and the divine. How much time do we spend with that? Very little. We spend all our time chasing things that are going to make us unhappy. And sometimes I think that the answer to being happy in life is to stop trying, because we all try too hard. We all overthink our lives, and I'm just as bad as everybody else. We all do it. And yet we forget, don't we? And then when we do find those moments of peace, we think, oh, isn't this lovely? And you come away and you feel all recharged and full of energy. You feel more healthy. Your energy of your body recharges. The energy of your psychology recharges. And the energy, I think, of your spirit recharges. And how does that done? Simply by stopping. But stopping and being awake and aware. Everybody seems to want the fame without the work. That's what it seems to be. They're not worried about, if you want to be a famous artist, I think if I wanted to be a famous artist, I would want my work to be good. You don't just want, and the fame is secondary. As Sai Baba said, fame is spittle. It's just nothing. It's a distraction. It's worthless. But the work you know, the work you do, that is marvelous. The work that you do, whether whatever field it would be in. But nowadays it's like, I want all the rewards, but I don't want to do the work. Like now you can get, so going back to artificial intelligence, you can get ChatGPT to write you a book, you know, and it'll pretty much write you a book if you want it to, and then you can put it up on Amazon and you can say, look at me, I've just written a book, and you think, and I think, crikey, imagine, I can remember the first book I wrote, I had to rewrite it 5 times before I actually got a publisher I wrote the book 5 times from scratch before I got the publisher to take it, you know, when I went to the publisher's office, I mean, her room actually was actually stacked, like the shelves behind me, with manuscripts. She said, those are all the manuscripts that have been rejected. I can't even read most of them, and your book has been accepted. So think how lucky you are to have that book accepted. As they get me to sign the contract, yeah, I'll sign there. But you know, it's like the work that, and that's not just that every field has been like that, but now it all becomes like instant, you know. I'm successful instant, but psychics are the worst. The work that you have to do to become a medium, 15 years demonstrating from a spiritualist church on a rainy evening on a Sunday, until you felt your skills were honed enough to be able to, you know, get it 100%. But people want to be instant with everything, and I despair at it, actually. And I think, like you say, Matthew, you said they're heading for a brick wall, basically, aren't they? Because these expectations that you can sort of, you know, instant success in life. I mean, I've been on programs like Big Brother, and I was also on that challenge thing for the Squid Game and things like that, and it was really interesting, because they'd asked me and Jane to be on Big Brother, and we didn't go on in the end. But it was like the people, you know, this is my chance to become huge overnight, you know. And I think all that ambition, and when you see the people, me and Jane fortunately take it in our stride because we've done so much television and seen so many things fizzle out. But you think the disappointment on people. And that's what happens, I think, in life. What we always see is those few that are success, and it seems like it's just dropped in their plate. But the reality is, a lot of people are heading for a lot of disappointment in the world generally, because that is the mentality that has overtaken most people that have been brought up from the internet and the sort of the social media and the sort of Big Brother type TV sort of world. Really scary stuff.
I have questions.
Oh yeah, hi Judy. Yeah,
I was listening to some YouTuber talking about Atlantics in the old days, maybe more than 10,000 years ago or 30,000 years ago. During that time, is that their world also had a very high tech technologies. Control the human being that time. The later on that world was destroyed. I wonder, are we going back to the same patterns? Because right now we are doing AI kind of technology to help us in our life, and also has a quantum kind of behavior, just similar to Atlantic's world in the old days. Do you have that feelings?
well,
Kind of weird.
interesting one there, because I mean, Edgar Casey talked. I think it was Edgar Casey talked about that in the age of the Atlantis had all these high technologies, and particularly was driven by this strange energy called vril. He called it, I think it was. And if we look to the east and we look to the ideas of Kamari Kandam, we see that there was a big sunken world that sunk then, that also had high advanced technologies, but these were done by mantra and by human consciousness. And we read of floating cities in the Ramayana, which they think is the continuation of those stories from the ancient Kumari Kandam. We see it in the Nadis, sometimes mentions of Kumari Kandam, which really gets my ears pricked up when I hear somebody's reading have that in it. Certainly there must have been something in the past that is sort of referenced so often, and the world of Mu and things like that, and all sorts of the ancient lost civilizations that sunk under the sea, which could have been the turn of the last ice age when the world flooded and so forth, as Graham Hancock has put forward ideas for, and so forth. I'm pretty convinced there was something like that. I mean, just from my own research, and my gut feeling is, yes, there was something like that. And so often civilizations rise and fall. I mean, I went to see Gladiator 2 the other day. I was expected to be disappointed. I was actually quite pleased with it. I thought it was going to be woked, but it wasn't too bad. But you think that civilization of Rome lasted all those thousands of years, and yet it's now we're speculating what was it, and it's not that far away in human history that it was there. And the idea of Atlantis was, I mean, spoken about by Solon from Egypt to Plato, and that was already historic knowledge in their day. And even the knowledge of the Sphinx. The Sphinx they didn't know the origin of at the time of the rise of the Egyptians. They carved the pharaoh's face onto an existing statue. So all of these things fade into history. So civilizations of huge quantities, that are probably big civilizations that rose and fell that we've never even know about, may have been there, with all sorts of capabilities of human consciousness. I think about the Sahara Desert that used to be green and used to be full of water, and one of the most prosperous, easy to live places on earth. What was there once upon a time, before the changes of the world, and when civilization shifted across to the fertile valley of the Middle East? There must have been more. And all civilizations, they rise and they fall, and maybe ours is. Are we the exception? Are we the exception because we were able to go a little bit further and put a foot on the moon and maybe a foot on Mars one day? Or are we just one more civilization that rises and falls? I mean, when you think about we as human beings, the sheer complexity of our minds, the sheer complexity of the body and the eye and things like that, and incredible things that have developed over these years. It takes, how long does it take for the human body to evolve? How long has the human soul been in existence? The vast amounts of time that must have been necessary for consciousness to develop in the universe. And we are the custodians of that consciousness at the moment. You see, what I think is, what is it that survived of all this? And what has survived is the human, at the moment, the human form has survived, but the human consciousness has survived. And if you accept that human consciousness can exist outside of the body, such as with near-death experiences and astral traveling, and if you can accept that the human consciousness continues after death, which I feel I spent my life trying to prove, if we accept that, then the only thing that really matters is that continuation of human consciousness, or consciousness itself, whether it's human or comes from animal forms or other forms. Consciousness is the ultimate goal of the universe. It seems to be the only thing that seems to survive the whole lot, the rise and falls of civilizations and so forth. So human consciousness is what it's about, the spirit, the soul. And so do we really have to worry about whether the world continues in 1,000,000 years' time? Does it matter to me now if the world still exists? Does it matter to me if the world disappears and bursts into a fireball in space? Because consciousness is not necessarily dependent upon the earth, is it? And if we have a multiverse with probably other habitable, my camera went, if we have a multiverse with other habitable planets, again, the Naadi say there are, then our consciousness can shift between one. There's plenty of places for the human and the spirit to develop and learn from this material plane. But this material plane is just one small part of an incredibly vast, timeless universe, and which go beyond even the laws of physics that we have here. Here we live in time, so we judge everything by time. There used to be ancient civilizations that came and went. What will happen to the human condition? What all our worries about what's going to happen in the future? But really, we shouldn't worry about any of it, because, we are spiritual beings. We are eternal beings. Nothing can ever kill us. There's no such thing as death. That's the great thing I think we learn from this. There is no such thing as death, and we have eternity to ultimately discover who we are, what we are, and And I think from what we've seen from the great people that have stepped before us, we know that the universe is benign. It's not out to get us. It's out to support us, or so we hope. But that seems to be the case. Okay, I think I'm going to leave it there now, guys, because we've got the show to do tonight for the Craig and James show, so I need to get ready to prepare for that. But thanks all of you for joining me. I think that was a really interesting conversation and a chat with you all. Really, really good. Thank you so much. Okay.
Thank you.
Soon.
Thank you, Craig.
Bye for now.
Bye,
Bye,
everybody.
everybody.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Craig.
Thanks. So do you like what I have to say? And do you like my work? Well, why don't you support my work? Have a look in the description below to go to my website, find out about psychic readings, find out about our Naadi readings with the Indian Naadi Oracle, buy my books and join my workshops online by Zoom. All there on the website psychics.co.uk.